Hello, everybody. I'm Mark DeSalvo. I'm the elected town moderator here in North Andover. This is the 10th, I believe, edition of On the Warrant, our opportunity to share with town officials, elected and appointed, what's happening on the warrant. We're going to spend most of our time today talking exactly about that. I have some wonderful guests, a first-timer in our new town manager who's doing an outstanding job, Melissa Rodrigues. We're also joined by the other chief executive in our community for the schools, Dr. Greg Gilligan. Most importantly, good old friends such as Dick Vaillancourt, who's the chair of the Board of Selectmen, and David Teresi, who's the chair of our elected school committee. And as well, another first-time guest is Sasha Weinreich, who is the chair of the FinCom. I'm happy to say that I've voted for all of you and appointed Sasha. So I think you've been doing an extraordinary job during these parlous times. So the first question that we have is, why are we having a town meeting? And I'm wondering, Melissa and Dick, if you could just advise us why it's so imperative that we have a town meeting at this moment in time.
Sure. Thank you, Mark. As we know, our government requires town meeting as our legislative branch, and town meeting has a very important job that it plays in formulating the finances of our next fiscal year. The town does have typically a statutory requirement to meet by June 30th in order to implement a town budget. Fortunately, we have seen some relief from that if necessary. However, the town's ability to go to a 1/12 budget is rather limited, especially due to the fact that we prepay many things in order to receive a discount, and those payments are due in July, but also that we have 3 payrolls in July, which would not allow us to make payroll due to the 1/12 budget. So for us to not wait until past June 30th would be very detrimental to the town.
So as a matter of good governance, we're saving some money and being prudent with the manner in which we choose to run the government, and that's why a meeting at this moment in time is really the most important thing necessary. Dick,
yeah, if I could just add to
please.
that, moderator. So in
Mark.
addition, you know, as the town manager spoke about the town budget, very critical that we get that in place before the end of the year. But we have other business of the town to conduct as well, and maybe not as critical and not as time sensitive as the budget, but we would like to get this other business conducted and get that through the approval or at least the what I'm looking for, the consent of town meeting.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to chime in? Okay, hearing not. One thing then about town meeting and the operations of town meeting, it will be a little bit different this year. For the first time in our history since 1646, we'll be having a town meeting outdoors. It will be on the field of the Joe Walsh Stadium, my former colleague on the North Andover School Committee. In any circumstance, it will be held outside at both the direction and guidance of the Board of Public Health, because it is much, much, much safer to have a meeting in an outdoor venue rather than an indoor venue. It'll be on the 16th of June, Tuesday at 5 p.m. We want to get things started as early as possible so we don't have lighting problems. And we'll be starting with what we call the consent calendar. Those non-controversial things that we've dealt with in all of these town meetings since I've presided over these last years as your town moderator. So then we'll dive right into what I believe will be likely scheduled the first substantive article, if I can characterize it that way. And that first substantive article is going to be about the town senior center. Now, I thought we passed the senior center, that new facility at the Knights of Columbus Camelot Hall last year. Why is it coming up once again? Dick, perhaps you can help us.
Sure, I'll give it a shot, and then the town manager might want to chime in as well. So the original plan to locate the senior center on the old Knights of Columbus property that we passed last year, after doing additional site work or site design work, we discovered that the facility would be really squeezed into a small section. We'd be sharing parking with other with the apartment complex that would be also located on the site. So we looked at a possible redesign of the facility and increasing the the parking area and also making a much more functional senior center that would be much more appealing to our seniors in the town.
Sure. Just building off of what the chair said, obviously, we have two articles that relate to the senior center. The first one, the parking is so important. We are able to get 81 spots now, and they won't be shared spots. But also secondarily, we are able to get a second egress. So we will not have seniors entering and exiting the property through a shared common driveway. There'll actually be a dedicated driveway to leave the property now, which for safety reasons is ideal. And then additionally, since the project was at town meeting last time, it has been bid, and now we have a better estimate or an exact cost of what that construction will be. And so we then deal in Article 13 with those additional construction costs.
And as I understand it, the FinCom is not yet weighed in on that circumstance. Will in fact they, Sasha, before town meeting?
Yes, we actually will be, I think, discussing this a bit more at our meeting tomorrow evening, so on the 9th. So you can tune in at 7 p.m. to hear some of that conversation. So I can't really opine on it because we have not had a formal vote, but I would like to point out that the warrant article reads that the additional funding for that parcel for the parking is actually going to be released from the overlay account by the Board of Assessors, or it has been, as the source of funding. So we'll definitely be taking that into account as we have our discussion.
Thank you. So we talked about the capital budget for a moment. Let me park that and let's go to the biggest item that as a matter of policy we're dealing with, and that's our town budget. We spend over $100 million a year as a community in North Andover, and I know, Sasha, you are intimately involved with being sure that they are prudent expenditures across the board. Let's ask the town manager first, and then Dr. Gilligan to weigh in on what priorities and policy initiatives might be in our town budget, both for the municipal side of the government and then the schools. Melissa?
So this year we're looking at a $111 million budget. We're seeing an increase from fiscal year 20 of about 4% in departmental spending, but 3.14% overall. The town departments are going up about 4.5%. The education budget is going up 4.5% as well. There's not a lot of new initiatives on the town side, but there are a few. And there's also kind of a change to how we typically budget. So I'll start with that. In the past, we had budgeted with a surplus in our health insurance line item that from savings that we saw from joining the GIC many years ago, and really have seen significant savings from that, and the town should be applauded for that. But we've been kind of holding those savings in that account, and now we're moving those over to a finance reserve account so that we can best plan for surprises or deficits that come up during the year. As far as new initiatives on the town side, we do have a digitalization of documents project, a part-time employee that will be looking at housing and really evaluating our housing stock and helping us get to our 10% for 40B. We have an addition of a part-time employee at the youth center to work the desk, which in the past has been only volunteers. And then we have some promotions and change to the leadership staff in the fire department. So no new employees, but creating 4 new lieutenant positions for less firefighter positions. And that would allow us to have more incident control, which is something that we saw through the Columbia gas disaster.
Well, if there's anything that we have experience with, it's emergencies in this community, and I'm quite sure that those are warranted. The Superintendent of Schools, Greg, if you could share with us, and then David Teresi, the chair, your thoughts about the school budget as it's being considered at this year's town meeting.
Well, as many of you know, I'm really appreciative of the work with the town manager this past winter to get a school budget of 4.52%. And for us, the level services is typically right around 3%. So what that meant for us is about 11 new positions in total, really targeting our strategic plan that was updated and voted on by the school committee this year, with the focus on equity for all students, targeted professional practice, and consistent and rigorous curriculum. And within that, I think some of the more Special positions are, building capacity within the district in a few of the special ed positions, so that our students who live in North Andover can stay in North Andover, and as well as, continuing to tackle class size, and providing additional support at the Atkinson School, which was a priority. So that was what we looked at this past winter, and I will turn it over to Chair Teresi.
Please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gilligan. Yeah, I mean, Greg hit the high points on this anyways. Obviously, our biggest initiative over the last several years, not a new initiative, but over the last several years has been reducing class size. I think the last time I was chair, I appeared in this program, Mark, was when we went to town meeting to talk about building the new Brad Street School, which put in motion the ability to lower class size throughout the district. We obviously built that building a couple of years ago now. I think this is the second year we've had it operating, and that allowed us to take all the kindergartens out of the 5 elementary schools, and that obviously provided us more space. And so these teachers that we're going to be hiring will allow us to continue that trend of lowering class size. The school committee has goals for each grade level to get under a certain number. And I think that, and Greg, you can correct if I'm wrong here, but I think this past year, we only had 15% of our classes above that threshold that we set for elementary school. So we're making
14.7. Very good, David.
Okay, 14, just under 15.
It's good to be
so
accurate.
we're making some great progress, obviously, with the help of town residents and town meeting. We've been able to accomplish that goal. So very excited to continue that trend.
That's great. Now, before we ask Sasha to comment, I just wanted to tell you that I neglected to relate that we're brought to you by a mix of Google Meet, I think, where the rest of the officials happen to be in their homes or exotic locations, as their backgrounds might suggest, and I happen to be in studio. And we're trying to engineer this back and forth, so if there's a couple of glitches, it's all on me. NACAM are great volunteers, and directors at NACAM have accommodated us enormously well during these parlous times. So Sasha, I know you can't comment specifically about this budget because you've not yet made a judgment as to whether to support it. But if you could comment about the process in which the FinCom has reviewed the budget so that there's some confidence about whatever judgment you happen to make when it's presented prior to town meeting.
Absolutely, Mark. So I think, if we put this in context, what the Finance Committee is most concerned about, that comment would be different a few months ago. I think that as it stands, we believe the FY21 budget is sound and strong, but we also believe that there needs to be some strategic planning surrounding how our relevant stakeholders are going to plan and react if revenues either come under budget or there's expenses that are not covered by funding such as the CARES Act. So what we did from a process standpoint is we evaluated the operating budget initially, and then once we understood that there would be impacts from the coronavirus, we talked to the town manager and the town finance director and asked some very specific questions, and you can go back to our meetings and review these if you'd like, about the impact to potentially property taxes, 70% of our revenue base approximately, or to local aid, or some of these things that would impact revenue. And we looked at some scenario analysis of, if there was a lack of revenues came in at X%, what would that do? So we did some of that work, and we got a lot of input from the town manager and the town finance director. And then I think we had a discussion regarding the concept of an MOU. So when I talk about strategic planning, the Finance Committee's, I think, thought process is that it would be very helpful to understand how relevant stakeholders such as the municipal side and the school side would treat any kind of unforeseen issue surrounding an approved budget in the future, right? And so we know that the Board of Selectmen at this point have, I think, approved that document, and that the school committee is reviewing it. And I think, and David, obviously correct me if I'm wrong, I think will be a public discussion about that on Thursday. So the Finance Committee looks forward to hearing that and making kind of our recommendation once we have further information surrounding that document.
Well, thank you for inviting the elephant into the room. So let's talk about that elephant right now. COVID environment puts pressures and stressors on all of us, and so we read in municipal, state, and federal budgets as well. With that recognition, I'm wondering if there's some mitigation that is available and or planned, and perhaps we can start with Dick Vaillancourt and then the town manager.
Sure. So as Sasha had said, we agreed to, on the Board of Selectmen, member of understanding, that if we face, we're really trying to protect against the worst case scenario where we have to start potentially using town funds to cover some of the costs based on lost tax revenues or additional costs based on the COVID-19. Our first plan is to seek federal reimbursement for any type of COVID-19 expenses that may occur, which is available. So that would be our first plan, to try to get money recouped in that manner. So the member of understanding is really just to help us or to put some sureties in place that we will do the best we can to try to recover those funds. And then, if we have to start using town funds to mitigate because of COVID-19, we'll do it in a structured, planned way.
And as I'm also aware, I thought the federal government has some mitigating funding programs that might be able to help us if in fact we have a bump in expenses and or additional stressors on our budget. Melissa?
That's true, that's correct. And that's was what I started saying at the beginning, was that, that would be our first source of seeking reimbursement, is through those federal programs. So if we have additional expenses, I think the examples we like to use is if we have to have additional cleaning done in the schools that are above and beyond what we currently have budgeted for our janitorial staff, or if we have to put more buses on because we have to split the day, or we just have to socially distance in the buses, that's going to cause additional expenses. We would be trying to seek reimbursement from the CARES Act for those type of expenses that would be driven primarily based on COVID-19 and the pandemic that we are now living through.
So perhaps, Melissa, you can share with us what kind of maximum, if there is a ceiling, that might be available under the CARES Act, and make any other comment that you wish, and then we'll go to David and Greg about specific school concerns that they have.
Sure. So as far as the CARES Act goes, the town of North Andover is eligible for up to $2.7 million in reimbursement from the federal government. There's two due dates. So one is June 12th. We're coming on up too quickly, and we're evaluating those current expenses, and we're up around the $800,000 mark so far, with about $400,000 of that coming from the schools. And then the second due date is still unknown. And in order to be eligible for the CARES Act, it has to be a COVID-related expense that's not budgeted for, that exists between March 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2020. So we will still have a lot of availability under the CARES Act, and there is a long list of items that we can be reimbursed for, and we're very thankful for that. And then additionally, there's also FEMA money available and grant money as well, and we've been applying for all of those too. And we actually can use the CARES Act funding as our match for FEMA, which is rather unusual. So there's been a lot of good support coming from both the federal and state government as far as local spending goes. And then as far as revenue goes, as Sasha said, the town is in many ways well insulated due to our tax base. And our local receipts have actually still continued to come in at a very normal rate. And that's been a very refreshing and good thing to see. This is one of the few times that a municipality can be happy that we really don't rely on a lot of outside sources like meals tax or hotels tax like many of our neighboring communities do. However, we do rely on state aid, and we know that we are not going to have a state budget by July 1st, and we may not have a state budget for a few months, and so we'll be having to operate on that 1/12 budget coming from the state. And we also know, based on conversations with the chairman of Ways and Means and our state legislators, that we should expect a decrease in locally to brace for that. And the MOU and a lot of the other measures that Greg and I have been working together to put forward are a really good way for the community to get ready for any potential impacts that we have not yet accounted for.
an exemplary reason why a town meeting is so required and might be welcomed despite these COVID times. And I can assure everybody that we're working collaboratively to make it a safe environment, an extraordinarily safe environment, and so that we can actually have an open, fair, and efficient town meeting. So for the schools, David, why don't you share with us your concerns relative to budget and the school in these COVID times, and whatever comforts you and the superintendent might have.
Sure. Thank you. I think the most important thing, if I can convey to the viewers that are watching this and also at town meeting on the 16th, is I think the town and the school side, we're going to need people's patience on this. We don't know what we don't know yet. Things are starting to come out right now that allude to the fact that we may only be able to have 10 kids in a classroom. I just talked about reducing class size. I wasn't talking about reducing class size that much, but that may be a requirement to go back to school come September. And I know Greg, Dr. Gilligan has put together teams with administrators, including some parents and teachers as well, to start looking at all the different aspects. And I think it was Dick who mentioned the busing. We don't know what busing is going to look like yet. There's a lot of unknowns. The anticipated cost to go back to school come September is going to be probably a lot higher than we're anticipating right now. We just don't know. Again, we don't know what we don't know, and we need to be prepared for it, I think. But we need people's patience, because I don't think we're going to have all the answers on June 16th. I think we're going to try like heck to get it. But like I said, things are starting to leak out slowly. And again, I saw a news report today that said it's going to be mandated only 10 kids in a classroom. So that's going to be a tough nut if that is indeed the case.
Greg, any comment?
Well, I just say first and foremost, thank you to the parents of and guardians of students we have here in North Andover. It's been a challenging spring, and this is truly unprecedented. UNESCO has a stat that they say worldwide there's about 1.5 billion with a B students out of school, just staggering for the spring. But to reiterate what the chair said, Taristi, there will be some challenges associated with COVID. And whether the knowns, which we've been working on for several weeks now, the technology that we need, the PPE that we need, and been working with Town Manager Rodrigues to order together. And last but not least, the social and emotional well-being of our students, our staff, and our parents, because it's going to be hard. I'm already getting emails from parents saying, I'm not sure if I want to send my kid to school. That said, some of the challenges that we face going forward will be around those guidelines from the state. I know that the state finally came out with summer school guidelines today. I've been promising them for a couple of weeks. So I think that's the one everyone saw with 10 students. And that's in this phase of the government. But, the challenges we face moving it forward are, what are we going to do for our kids? How can we bring them to school in a way that's safe, that follows the guidelines? And how do we keep them on track of where they're supposed to be, but also make up some potential gaps from last year? So to that end, we've been planning for about 6-7 weeks on a few things, but we will be convening a summit or an institute with staff the week of June 22nd. We're lucky to have John Dioria from formerly of UPenn to help us facilitate that. And we're also going to have some parent focus groups along with a survey that I'll be sending out probably tomorrow to parents. What worked well this spring, what didn't go well. I think there's a lot to learn, but I do think that if we had to be out of school with remote learning next year, it would look very different than it does now. And
thank you.
The other part, Mark, if I could just add to that real quickly, the other part is that we don't know what kind of shape these kids are going to be in when they come back in September. They've been out of school for 3 months. We're fortunate that most, if not all, of our kids have been checking in with our teachers. I've seen statistics where other districts, 20% of the kids haven't checked in via Zoom or Google Hangouts or whatever there is. So our kids have been checking in, but it's a big concern. Our teachers are going to have to really have their hands full come September, and we have to evaluate that when we get back into class.
Much appreciated. So Sasha, back to you. Are you prepared as a FinCom for whatever might come post what happens at town meeting? The best thing that we can do right now is we all act in good faith and present a good faith budget with good faith and it appears appropriately supported revenue estimates and comforts as well. But again, we don't know where we are. So is there a role for the FinCom going forward as well in order to give town meeting members some comfort about the judgments that they make at town meeting?
Absolutely. So as part of, I think, the MOU and regardless of kind of how that ends up, there are certain aspects of our budget this year that I think Town Manager Rodrigues touched on. So you'll notice that in our budget, we do have a Finance Committee reserve in which the Finance Committee would have some knowledge and would opine on where those funds were going to be allocated. So that's about $1.6 million. That would be, I think, the first place where we would start. And Melissa, please correct me if that's off. And also, the Finance Committee has two members, if you're unaware of this, that are appointed to the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee every year. So the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee this year did play a role in reviewing revenues and making recommendations to the town manager. And we would do that again in the fall. And so part of that would really be to make sure that our revenues were on track so that we didn't need to go to these other, go down this kind of scenario list. And we would feel comfortable with where revenues were coming in to move forward for the remainder of the fiscal year.
If there's any time to have a rainy day fund, it's this time period to have a rainy day fund. And we have a quite significantly large one comparative to other municipalities in the Commonwealth. And that's testimony to all of you and your former colleagues over these years in being so prudent in the manner in which we've operated our budget, but also been careful to deal with a situation like this. So let's move on because we're down to some few moments. We have several other issues to talk about. Let's have a very quick review of our capital budget. I'll ask the town manager to share that with us. And also perhaps we can talk about another source of expenditures, and that's the Community Preservation Act that provides such a additional attributable benefits to our community.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about both or either. And so this year we have about 19 projects in our capital improvement plan for a total of $6.5 million in the general capital improvement plan. And then we have another series of projects that are coming from the Sewer Enterprise Fund and the Water Enterprise Fund as well. The projects are really general maintenance type projects. There is $3 million in funding for the senior center, but there's also playground improvements, IT, buying cruiser radios, buying a new ambulance, sidewalk funding, and it's all the things that really we need to purchase year to year and that we plan for. The town has a 5-year capital plan. We meet with the school department annually, usually around September, and we work together to formalize these plans. The funding source this year is actually free cash. And the reason for that is that we have about $12 million in free cash. We'll still have $6 million in free cash at the end of this town meeting if all of the appropriations are approved. And obviously free cash goes away on June 30th and it gets recertified. And the reason we chose free cash as a funding source is because we are working on the Facilities Master Plan 2. And we know that the Facilities Master Plan 2, which is highly the schools as well as the 2nd Fire Department, we will be using debt in order to pay for those projects. And we like to keep our debt around 4 to 5% of the budget. And in order to keep with that goal, which our bond rating agencies really like, we are using free cash this year to fund that.
Excellent. And community preservation?
Sure. So the CPC has several projects. The two really major ones are the Schofield Mill. So the Schofield Mill is the building where the thrift shop is down on Sutton Street, and it is in disrepair right now and has been condemned. There's some structural issues that exist due to actually bean post beetles. And so this money will be used to bring that building back to compliance. And then the second major project is a renovation of the historical entranceway at the Stevens Memorial Library. And of course, there's affordable housing, as there is every year, and funding for playgrounds. As we know, CPC funds are very limited in their uses. And these projects have all gone through a very robust analysis from the CPC committee. They've done a great job.
Thank you. Now, we have one other item. We'll stick with you, Melissa, for the moment, and Dick principally. And that's the Lucent facility and the prospect of a tax increment financing arrangement with the owners of that facility who will then lease to Amazon. Could you explain what's going on with that?
Sure. So right after I started with the town, Amazon did come to us and ask us to enter into a TIF agreement with them. So a TIF agreement is a tax incremental financing agreement. And for those people who don't know, tomorrow I'm actually doing a virtual town hall where people can call in questions as well.
That tomorrow will be Tuesday, the 9th, because we're filming on Monday, the 8th right now. Sorry.
So yeah, Andrew Shapiro, the development director, a member of Amazon staff, and I will be available to answer any questions people have about it. But we negotiated 2 documents right now. One is a TIF agreement and one is a development agreement. This is actually the first development agreement that has ever been negotiated with Amazon. So we're really excited about that. And these 2 documents really go hand in hand. So the TIF is a 10-year TIF. And it gives Amazon about $27 million in tax relief over that 10-year period. The town will receive about $18 million over that 10-year period. However, it does not include personal property, which is a pretty major point, and we will be seeing quite a lot of income from that personal property during that time period. And so, you know, over that 20-year period, we had anticipated about $60 million in income for the town, and now it's looking to be more like $80 million in income from the town. So we're really excited about that, and we'll be talking a lot more about that and about the project, and I hope people can tune in tomorrow with questions. And then for the community partnership agreement that we have, the development agreement, that's really a roadmap for the development. It lays out what the town's responsibilities are as well as the responsibilities for the developer. But it also has a lot of things for the town within it. So we know that we're going to be getting $2.3 million for sewer along 125, that we're going to be receiving about $2 million in infrastructure that MassDOT is requiring along that area. Over the life of the TIF, they're going to be giving $3 million to the school department for STEAM and STEM programming. It's about $300,000 a year for the 10 years. We'll be receiving $700,000 for trees, an annual veterans job fair, money for traffic mitigation, funding for so many different things. It's $100,000 for the senior center for technology, $100,000 for the youth center, for the library for technology. It's about $8 million in benefits to the town that are coming from that community development agreement.
And the chair of our Board of Selectmen, Dick, you had to deal with a recommendation last year in suggesting that the community should support the Hillwood / Amazon development. Is this an unwelcome circumstance, or is it really business as usual?
Well, I think, you know, it is business as usual. I think what the town manager just laid out, she did a tremendous job laying out the benefits that we would be getting and the tax revenues that we would be getting. I don't think we can understate the importance of this project for this, not only North Andover, but the whole region, for the jobs that it's going to bring to the area, for the benefits that other businesses will also see, especially coming out of, you know, COVID-19. I don't want to keep leaning on that as an excuse, but, you know, coming out of there, a lot of businesses are hurting. And, you know, when we start bringing in, or when they start bringing in construction crews and then eventually employees, that's all going to benefit the businesses in the area, not just North Andover, but in the Merrimack Valley. So this is such an important project. And the town manager and the director of economic and community development did a tremendous job meeting with Amazon, negotiating, going back and forth for this agreement. And I think what we have before us is the best that we can possibly get from them. And as the town manager laid out, we're getting a number of benefits for the community. And, you know, we are still getting a significant amount of tax dollars coming from the facility that we would not be getting. So it really is you know, I think it's business as usual. I think it's a good move that we go forward with this, and you know, the Board of Selectmen has unanimously voted on favorable for this article, and I hope going to town meeting, that we would see the town people also approving and understanding the importance of this article and moving forward with it.
And the Finance Committee? Will they be weighing
So
in?
the finance, yeah, they absolutely. So the Finance Committee hasn't made a formal recommendation on the warrant article regarding the TIF. However, you can again tune into our meeting on the 9th at 7 p.m. We will be further discussing it. But I can say that I am incredibly hopeful that we found a solid use for a very underutilized parcel in our community that would provide significant tax benefits, as well as community benefits and additional tax benefits because of personal property tax.
So if I read this correctly,
Mark?
yes, please.
No, I was just going to say, if I just could, the school committee is not going to obviously weigh in on this, but I just want to lend my personal support to this article because it's extremely, extremely important that we bring Amazon in as a tenant there. I think those of us who've lived in a town our entire life know what that used to be like and what that meant to not only the jobs in the area, but also to our tax base. Absolutely critical that Amazon comes here. So, I commend the town manager and the board of selectmen for engaging with them and producing an agreement, which I think is more than fair.
Thank you. If I'm hearing things correctly, notwithstanding the request, unsurprising request for a TIF, we're in the circumstance where total net revenues over the 20-year period, and here's hoping that it goes on for 30 or 40 years, will be significantly above what might be perceived to have been promised at last year's town meeting. So I think the last item that we need to talk about are some changes, cultural changes perhaps, to how we refer to the Board of Selectmen. And there will be an article relative to that. Dick, why don't you weigh in as to what's happened and why?
So, sure. One of our members brought forward an article that one of the members of the Board of Selectmen, who actually she's no longer a member, brought forward an article that would change and make the name of the Board of Selectmen a gender-neutral name and call it, be referred to, if we get the approval of town meeting, as the Select Board. I think I wholly support this move. I think it is more reflective of the makeup of the board now. I think when we, as a board, we are a mixed gender board, and I think the name just reflects that. And we've seen many of our communities, our neighboring communities, change to Select Board as well. And to me, there's really no reason not to. I think it's a good move. It's a positive move. Even if we look at other boards and other job descriptions in our town, we see a lot of, and we may not even realize it, but we see a lot of gender neutral terminology. For example, we have a school committee, we have a planning board, we have a zoning board, we have police officers, and we have firefighters. So it's, we may not even realize it, but a lot of those have already become gender neutral. And I think this is just a step in that direction as well. And I wholly support this article going forward.
Does anybody else wish to?
Thank
you. Anyone else wish to comment on this before we lose the opportunity to call Dick a select man in just a couple of days?
That was what I was going to ask. What do we call you now? Like select guy? Or select guy?
I don't know, but I'm going to have to have all my signs redone for next year.
Listen, I think we agree 100%. It's gender neutral. It should be non-controversial, and hopefully we'll get through it real quickly.
I generally refer to the chair as His or Her Majesty, so I think that would continue to work. And they would.
I hope that does.
And I do that to the FinCom chair as well, as she will no doubt tell you, because they deserve it. In any case, so thank you so much, everybody, for gathering today. This is by no means an exhaustive review, but you can see all of the presentations that are going to be made, all of the warrant articles, all of the motions will be available on our town website. That's northandoverma.gov. You can go to the /townmeeting page and or just type in Town of North Andover and you'll get to everything that we have. Most importantly, you've seen reasoned, good faith work by the folks that you've been watching today. And the culmination of their work for almost 8 or 9 months now, more than that in some cases, will be town meeting. I invite you to come to town meeting. Bring your mask, please. It will be a safe environment, I can promise you that. And most importantly, I ask you, along with your mask, is to bring your good judgment. For those few hundreds or more people who will come to a town meeting on the field of the Joe Walsh Football Stadium, you can relive, some of us, our glory days perhaps. You'll have the opportunity to make judgments for the entire community of North Andover. All 30,000 of us, you who attend, will be making policy judgments for all of us. And I know that we trust you to do that in support, hopefully, of the work and good reason judgment that these folks that have been talking with us today. So to Greg and to Dick and David and Sasha and to Melissa, thank you very, very much. This is on the warrant. Go to the town meeting page, RSVP, so we know how many people we can seat and seat you safely in a very, very welcoming environment. Thank you each for everything that you do for our community, and I wish you all a good day.